Unfortunately, the one and only Tobin Redwine is still in America, so he's not able to join us today. But I am Jessica Spence, the Program Coordinator at the Prolog Institute for the International Agricultural Education Fellowship Program. So the International Agricultural Education Fellowship Program is a long-term international experience where U.S. citizens are currently volunteering in Ghana as agriculture educators, extension agents, and 4-H advisors. What I wanted to do is take an in-depth look at the first month that the fellows went into their communities. We know a lot of things through literature are occurring at that point, some culture shock. They're getting their first footing in their jobs and what they need to do, integrating their communities, learning a language. And so the aim of this study was to take a look at that first month of what those fellows are doing on the job, but through their perspective using Photovoice. So Photovoice is a participatory action research method wherein the participants are able to use photography as well as their own verbal discussion to really delve into their own experience, and in this case being the fellowship experience. So the fellows were tasked with taking photos of their lives that first month, challenges, triumphs, anything they felt was significant. And one thing I may say about this Photovoice is you could probably consider it a modified Photovoice, because the fellows asked at the end of the month, that's when we had our focus group, and they were like, Jess, can we use photos that were taken of us? And I have a hard time telling them no to things, but B, that's feedback from my participants, and so I told them yes. So you'll see in some of the photos later in these, there are photos that they took of each other, but also were taken of them that they felt described their experience better than a photo they could have taken themselves. But they each took a lot of photos, dividing I told them they could submit 5, which is a little bit, I'd say also more than the past photo voices that I've done, but they would have loved to have talked about more than that. But we had several hour-long focus group where they showed each other their photos, one participant at a time, and spoke about their experience, and also had an interpersonal dialogue amongst them, so it wasn't just one participant speaking at a time. It was them talking about their photograph, their experience because of that photograph, what was happening, and then discussing experiences that really related or were surprised by something, and things like that. So the demographic, this was a census of the 9 fellows of IAEFP, which were 2 males and 7 females between the ages of 22 and 27. They all have varying degrees in agriculture, at least a bachelor's. We have a master's graduate, current master's, and current PhD student as well. And varying backgrounds in agriculture and an international experience. So for one, we had their first trip out of US ever. We have had several that have had long-term international experiences that were studied out prior to this experience. We've had some that grew up on production agriculture operations, and some that their relation to agriculture is more in their higher education. So quite varied backgrounds as far as their job is considered. So on to the results. To protect the identity of my participants, you can see my lovely smiley faces. That's my solution to them wanting photos of themselves in this Photovoice. But the first, my font not translate well. Anyway, camaraderie is our first theme out of the 9 themes that were developed from this Photovoice. And the fellows definitely felt their fellow fellows as a part of their experience, and felt a lot of camaraderie, friendship, and family amongst each other, and really expressed leaning on one another through phone calls, voice messages on WhatsApp, even if they were far away, that communicating with one another individually and in different groups was really important to them, as well as getting to get together to meet each other, visit each other's communities, and just keep up with each other quite constantly, and also very much enjoying time spent together at our programmatic location. Another one is struggles. Between this photo and a photo of a fellow laying in their bed they had a fever and a towel on their forehead, clearly struggling. But the struggles vary from physical, with language, illness, and also with the culture and with integrating into a culture that's very far from their own. So in this particular picture, one of the participants described this experience as students weeding a garden, but about 2 minutes before this photo was taken, there were students dancing and smiling and happily weeding a garden, and their co-teacher came out. Was very upset for other reasons other than it wasn't the dancing, and came a couple of students, so some corporal punishment, and this was the attitude of the students after that event happened. And so struggling with teaching styles that we're very not used to as American citizens, and so still learning how to navigate those classroom dynamics when you're coming in and working with a co-teacher, and it's not your classroom, and to respect the culture that's currently existing. Recognition of other empowered women. So this was a large theme that came from many of the participants, and that was recognizing individuals in the community and teachers in school, and especially female students, and specifically the 4-H space and the school garden, where many participants expressed that female students were taking the lead in the labor-intensive and hard work and leadership. And so this participant took this photo when asking for students to all bring banana, not seedlings, they're obviously larger than that, but banana plants to bring to their garden. She noticed that it was these female students bringing bowls, pulling and going to supply the garden and to help themselves. Appreciation of culture and history. So part of the training involved that the fellows had a lot of training in culture and history, and fellows spent a lot of time independently continuing to educate themselves in cultural history, taking time on weekends to visit cultural sites like this Chief's Temple and Cape Coast. Exploration. So this was a large part of what the fellows participants expressed being a major part of their first month. Exploration. They're in a brand new country, and only exploring their communities was part of this theme, but also exploring spaces outside of that community and being able to travel to new locations within Ghana and to take time to explore the country. Personal growth. So these participants had just climbed a mountain to see a waterfall, and that may go into exploration, but this goes, I'd say, more into personal growth. They expressed going out of their comfort zones, gaining more cultural knowledge, and also professional development skills as they started working in a school, some of them being sometimes their first job, and a few cases with the fellows or with the participants. So finding community within their community was a large part of their first month, getting to know their host mom, host dad, siblings, their new school. This is a participant on her way back from a wedding, stuffed in a taxi with her 2 host sisters who were a large part of her experience that first month. Really, she expressed taking away loneliness and being a large part of her comfort when it came to settling into her new home. As we expected, a large theme was just physical time spent in school, as obviously a large part of their experience, and 4-H and working with 4-H Ghana and starting or continuing those 4-H clubs was a heavy theme in discussing what made up their experience that first month. As well as a theme, I'd say separate from that came about was just appreciation for students. Almost all of the participants expressed how much they appreciated the hard work from their students and the help when it came to language, just in the classroom, getting their bearings under them, but also just being attentive and excited students. So, a key component of Photovoice, as per Wayne Burris, is to enact policy change. That's the third and kind of final part of this method, and very integral to the method. And so, our aim and purpose was to delve into this experience, but to also make policy changes or recommendations just based on the findings of this. If you were there for our AgriCorps study that we presented, we kind of have a snapshot of what maybe into that first month and exploring what's occurring in that really critical time. And so based on that and these findings, we recommend some training in illness prevention and local diseases, continuing that as that contributed to our struggles theme. Increased details of emotional struggles of past fellows to prepare, again, coming from that challenges he had more emotionally, just being able to prepare future fellows for what might occur during that first month with all of those struggles. As well as, like I said, we had cultural and historical training, but the need for more of that was evident as fellows continue to search for that on their own post-training. Continuing with recommendations, back to that gender-specific training, that's not specifically a component of this fellowship, but based on the theme of empowered women and girls, we recommend that fellows receive specific gender training for both components of empowering women on how to engage both female and male students in women empowerment. And lastly, we recommend that international organizations or programs of the like use Photovoice as a means of discovery, but also reflection. It could have been maybe a sub-theme, but a lot of the participants expressed appreciation for the method itself. They loved seeing what their other cohort members had done their first month, being able to relate to one another, and they expressed wanting to do the Photovoice again. So we plan on doing it the last month and do some comparative analysis. They really expressed enjoying the process of Photovoice and the reflective piece of it, both themselves and interpersonal communication with their cohort. I'm not seeing any questions.
Really impressive presentation. I think it's going to be a really neat for you guys to think about it in terms of changes for your own programming and things like that. So I'm glad that you mentioned the policy change, because that is a big aim of Photovoice. Another big aim is to kind of call for change through social justice. And so I see when you talk about the caning and that kind of stuff, how will you help your fellows navigate some of those issues that are more, culturally, like based, I guess, you know what I mean, but also maybe from our eyes that they would view as wrong, you know what I mean? How do you address that?
Really great question, and this actually, this discussion led to some further discussions, and it was really well timed as far as that social justice piece, because part of this programming includes teacher workshops and teacher trainings, and that in the past programming was towards the end of the program, and due to several reasons, we changed it to the first semester, and so those ended up being in October and November, and so after this and this discussion, and that photo discussion led to a lot of further discussion, because that was not the only fellow who experienced that. Almost all of them had. And caning is not illegal, but it is not supported by the Ministry of Education in Ghana. And that is known, but not always practiced. We do have some fellows that are at schools where headmistress is very strict about there will be no caning. In fact, another job if you want to cane. That is not the case, unfortunately, at most locations. And so that discussion led to, when it came to those teacher workshops, positive youth development and methods for discipline or just things like that. It was a topic, a part of the training. And so what was decided on how to handle that conversation was for that to be a committee-led conversation, because there are teachers with different opinions. That was not an American lens-led conversation, and that was really important to the fellows into our programming based on our findings, but also just based on cultural sensitivity and a lot of other reasons. And so it prepared the fellows for that conversation to happen, and in some trainings that conversation went away and American lens would appreciate, and sometimes it went away where an American lens would maybe not appreciate. So, but the decision to further support an American not being that conversation was what came out of that as well.
Questions? Yes.
I have a follow-up. I know we had a conversation about this on the pre-conference trip, but I think it's something that people in this room can benefit from. Can you talk about, I guess, the complex relationship between, as researchers and fellows, appropriation versus appreciation of all the last ones?
definitely. So that's a conversation we have constantly, and I think even more as times go on. So something we were talking about beforehand is like, I'm wearing my Ghanaian blazer, and there's a lot of spaces in the U.S. where maybe this would be considered cultural appropriation, but a lot of things that occur to me and the fellows that happens is it's an expectation that I have this manner that I wear a Ghanaian or African print on Fridays. That's a thing that everyone does, and I attended a funeral and had an African or Ghanaian black funeral top and skirt made, and the head of 4-H Ghana wanted to take a picture of me because he was so proud that instead of an American black dress, I was wearing a Ghanaian black dress. So there's definitely, that's just not even a line, it's a blurred gray space that people, I don't think, can really land on the same space about, and a constant conversation amongst myself and the fellows with our American lenses, and even what is something that's normal and okay for us as Americans to participate in Ghana. As white Americans, we have fellows of different races, and so where is that line of space for those fellows and what they feel. But I think it being a discussion and hearing everyone's feedback on that topic is really important. So it remains to be one that we speak about quite often. But great point.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. They wanted me to wear their clothing and all that, so that's very true. Definitely. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. I mean, when you think about photography, it's so powerful, right? Photos. Was there any training that's needed in photography, or it's just like, hey, whatever you shoot, we can use, or is that something that the students have?
Yeah, so actually in the training that occurred in Ghana, I'm a photographer, and I conducted a training on photography with the participants or with the fellows as part of their training in the program, and that was more so composition and some very basic things. The fellows all have smartphones that take great pictures, but in terms of Photovoice, I've conducted one for my thesis in northern Uganda, and there was a bit more, not necessarily photography training, but camera use training. I used point and shoot, so that was quite necessary. And some very basic compositional things, and more just like not putting finger over the photo type things. We talked a lot about storytelling as well in photos, and different components that help tell a story. And both times I've conducted the Photovoice. But there's also a key part of not giving too much instruction or too much control. And an often thing that happens, no matter what we're talking about, is that maybe people of this age are just wanting to know what's the answer, what do you want from this, or what can I do to fulfill the need, and so not encroaching on that space and saying this is what I want from you, but more what is your experience and what you see. So a little bit, but not too much. Great question.
Any others? All right, great job.